go. So I'm going to go ahead and get this out of here. So the way of dispatch that I do, oh yeah, and maybe I'll show you how I have this packaged here. Let me see if I can. Once I dispatched it, I tucked the legs up inside the rib cage because it's kind of, yeah, when you cut the bone, it could be very ragged and sharp. And so that will puncture your bag, possibly. So a good way to put them in the bag is to have them tucked in there. So let me see if I can get this to drain before I remove this.
And it looks like you also had the front legs tucked into the belly flap.
I did that too, didn't I? Yeah, so these are also sharp here. So that would have been a good way to tuck it in. All right, still has a little frost. It didn't defrost all the way. Now what I like to do first is I like to do the arm sections. And so you can see that there's a shoulder blade here. And the foreleg is like a floating appendage. It does not like a ball and socket or anything like that, like a pig or other. You know, I hear that deer are like that. So if you've ever broken down a deer, since I'm going to be using this as a piece of meat that I might want to cook separately, I want to try to keep as much meat on there as possible. So you can see that it has some of this flesh that's coming across to the sternum here, and then also some of the meat that's attached back here. So what I'll try to do is I'll go a little bit closer to the middle instead of starting right at the armpit. I'll just start there, and that way I can just grab a little bit more of that meat with that leg, and then this way as well I can. And it's just basically following the rib cage. And it comes right off like that. It's very easy. So then we'll flip it over to the other side. Now this is, sometimes they'll have this meat, little bits of fat along its back here. The older it is, the larger that fat might be. You could, just put that aside. If you have an older rabbit and you're feeding them too much, you will notice it's going to have a lot of fat inside. Now this one doesn't have too much fat. This is reasonable. If you are feeding them too much, this is what you're going to find is they're going to be full of a lot of fat in there. That means you're wasting a lot of money. That fat is not the tastiest fat, so I know some people will just go ahead and grind it into sausage or whatever, but I wouldn't say it's the tastiest stuff. All right, so then this side as well, I'm going to go a little bit along the spine there, and then along the rib cage. I don't know if you can all see that. There is some little floating little extra bone here for some reason. It's like a collarbone or something that sometimes it snags. There we go. Okay. Now these two pieces, what I'll usually do is I'll keep all the front legs and then I'll maybe brine them before I freeze them so that they're kind of flavored and tenderized and then I'll, cook them like regular chicken wings. Like I'll put a dry rub on it or something and roast them. So here you could break them down to two pieces if you want to. And sometimes this little joint is a little tricky. It's not really intuitive where that break is, but if you wrench it back with your hands, you can see where the split is.
For me, I like to actually fold, like go like that.
Yeah. Oh, and you find that joint?
It's easier to find the joint like that.
Yeah. So anyway, just wanted to leave that there so you can see how you can break it down so that you have two pieces there. Okay. Next, what I like to do is I like to take the leg quarters off. Now, there's an interesting little joint here. So you could, and I'm going to show you one of each ways that you can take the legs off. One is to just follow, there's a little hip joint here. So you can go on the inside of that and follow it along and along the back here and go on the inside. And then it's very easy to get that hip out of joint and just remove that leg. So that piece does not, it just has the end of the bone and the flesh is all over there. The other way to do it, now see, here's that hip bone here. The other way is you can go on the outside of that hip bone, on this side, on the outside of that bone. And then I would meet it from both sides. And then you would give it a little crack. So that's another way you can remove it. Now that's where that hip bone is, so there's a kind of like a plate of bone here, and then the meat is attached to it there. So you can see that you'll get more meat on that piece if you do that, if you don't mind, you know, eating around the bone and stuff. But you could easily just have that off, and then it's a lot easier once it's prepared to get to the meat, you know. So that's something that you might want to consider. So you can see here, here's the tail, and so there's that bone that's still attached here of the one that deboned, and this one is removed. Okay, after that, you could just follow the belly flap, which is along the rib cage here. Just follow that rib, the line of that rib, and then to the loin. Now you don't want to cut into the loin, so you might want to just remove that, so that way it's out of the way there. And likewise this way.
Seeing it from this angle, you can actually see to follow it along the rib cage.
Okay, so now there's a couple of ways you can do this loin. So some people will debone do the loin all the way, the whole strap here. You can debone that, like there. You can also look inside and see where that last rib is there, and you can follow that rib up, and then then you'll have a loin piece that's like that, and then the rib cage. So what I'm going to do is we'll just follow one line of the rib. Now sometimes you could go above a little bit more if you want it to be longer, but I'm just going to stay with that last rib so you can find where that last rib is sticking out. Get under there and then follow that angle because you want as much of that loin as possible. Okay, so I brought it up to here, and then I'm going to follow the other side up. And at that point, it's really easy to just twist, and that'll make the vertebrae disjoint right there. So now you want to get the tail off. So a lot of times too, it's easier before you get rid of the bone is to get the meat off of the joint before you try to use, let's say, this is just a what do you call this? A kitchen shear or a bone scissors or whatever. So you could go ahead and just use that to crack it, or you can find the actual joint with your knife and work it that way. But that's going to be partly for the soup. And then this rib cage as well could be retained either for the dog or, you know, for the soup. You can save that. Now this loin piece, there's a couple of ways you can just cut it in half here. So then you'll have two loin portions that you can use. You can braise or whatever. Or you can debone it. And so there is a little silver skin on here. So Sometimes it's good to just get rid of that top silver skin. It might be a little tough. Pull that off. Sometimes it's easier to come off once you fillet it, but
Nicely done.
there. Okay. All right. So what I like to do is, if I'm going to debone it, I just follow the spine, and I try to, and I'm using a pretty skinny deboning knife, so that way I can get in there. So I'll just try to follow the contour of the vertebrae. And then you're going to have a little bit of a turn. You could do just the top loin part separate, like so, and then underneath is the tenderloin. Get rid of some of this. So these pieces on the underneath, this is like super tender in here, right? Because this is on the inside underneath. So there's a very, very tender piece right there. And then I'll do this side. Again, sometimes it's a little tricky to get around the vertebrae, but you try to harvest as much meat as you can, obviously. And again, this is a small rabbit, so a larger rabbit would give you definitely bigger pieces. So there's the, yeah, we'll get that tenderloin part off. So you could also retain these, and they can just be really good for stir fry. You know, if you have a little baggie of that, you can just make that into stir fry really easily. And then these look pretty small. Again, it's a small rabbit, but what I'll do with you could either, this makes really nice like boneless chicken type dishes. You know, you can cut it up into bites. But also what I'll do is I'll just like butterfly it. So I could split it like that, and then have a nice little, you know, piece that you can easily fry up in the pan with some butter or something, and it's very tender. So that would, you know, substitute for a nice piece of chicken breast meat like that. So you've got those. So there you go. The rabbit's been broken down.